You want to know what real love looks like. It's not the fairy tale. It's not the sunset kiss or the grand gesture that gets applause from strangers. It's not the Instagram post with a heart eyes emoji and a caption about soulmates. Real love is standing guard over someone who will never know you're there. It's sacrificing everything for a person who might never say thank you. It's choosing to protect, to serve, to give, knowing full well that your reward is nothing, less than nothing, perhaps even hatred in return. I loved someone once, completely, hopelessly, in a way that rewrote the entire trajectory of my existence. And she never loved me back. She chose another. She built a life with him. She had a child with him. And then she died, and I spent the rest of my life protecting that child. A child who had his father's face, his father's arrogance, his father's everything. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? But here's what the poets and the philosophers and the peddlers of romantic nonsense won't tell you. That kind of love, the unrewarded, unreciprocated, unreasonable kind, is the purest form that exists, because it's stripped of all the things we pretend aren't there: the ego, the transaction, the unspoken contract that says, I'll love you as long as you love me, back in the exact way I need. The world has taught you that love is a trade, an exchange of affection for affection, attention for attention, devotion for devotion. They've turned the most powerful force in human experience into a marketplace where everyone's keeping score, checking receipts, making sure they're getting their money's worth. But what if I told you that love only becomes real when you remove the reward entirely? When you strip away every expectation, every hope of reciprocation, every fantasy of happily ever after, what's left is either nothing or everything. And the difference between those two outcomes, that's what separates those who truly understand love from those who are just playing at it. So, let me ask you something, and be honest. Have you ever loved someone, truly loved them, without needing anything in return? Or have you just been negotiating contracts and calling it romance? Let me paint you a picture of how most people love. It's transactional, conditional, a carefully balanced ledger where every deposit demands a return. I'll be vulnerable with you, but only if you're vulnerable first. I'll sacrifice for you, but you better notice and appreciate it. I'll stand by you, as long as you stand by me in exactly the way I've imagined. I'll give you my heart, but if you damage it, I'm taking it back with interest. This is what passes for love in your modern world. A series of negotiations dressed up in romantic language. Everyone's keeping score, even when they pretend they're not. Especially when they pretend they're not. You give a compliment and wait for one in return. You make a grand gesture and expect recognition. You invest time, energy, emotion, and in the back of your mind, there's always that little accountant tallying up what you're owed, what you deserve, what you've earned through your devotion. And when the balance sheet doesn't add up, when you've given more than you've received, that's when the resentment creeps in like a poison, slow and insidious. After everything I've done for them, I gave them the best years of my life. This isn't what I signed up for. But here's the brutal truth. If you're keeping score, you were never playing the right game. I watched James Potter love Lily Evans. Oh, he was persistent. I'll give him that. Grand gestures, public declarations, the whole performance. But what was underneath all that theater? Ego, the need to win, the desire to possess the one thing everyone else admired. He loved the idea of her, the trophy of her, the validation that came with her. And maybe, eventually, he grew into something more real. Maybe fatherhood changed him, matured him. I wouldn't know. I was too busy actually protecting what he claimed to love, while he got to play the hero in the light. You see, conditional love is easy. It's comfortable. It comes with an instruction manual and a return policy. You know exactly what you're getting into because you've negotiated the terms up front. It's love as a business arrangement, sanitized and safe. But that safety, it's also a prison. Because the moment you attach conditions to love, you've transformed it into something else entirely. A transaction, a contract, a strategic alliance masquerading as emotion. Real love, the kind that actually transforms you, that burns away everything false and leaves only what's essential, doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't come with warranties or guarantees. It doesn't promise you anything except the opportunity to give everything and possibly receive nothing. And that terrifies people, because we've been conditioned to believe that martyrdom is pathological, that self-sacrifice is weakness, that loving without reward makes you a fool. But what if being a fool for love is the only way to be wise about it? What if every condition you attach is just another wall between you and the experience of loving purely, completely, without the contamination of expectation? The world will tell you to protect yourself, to guard your heart, to make sure you're getting what you deserve. And in doing so, they'll ensure you never experience love at its most powerful, when it asks nothing, expects nothing, and gives everything anyway. There's a particular kind of pain that comes with loving someone who doesn't love you back. It's not the sharp, clean break of an ended relationship. It's not the dramatic tragedy of star-crossed lovers kept apart by circumstance. It's slower, more corrosive. It's watching the person you'd die for choosing someone else. It's knowing that every beat of your heart in their direction is a beat they'll never feel. It's the exquisite torture of proximity without possession, of mattering without being wanted. And here's what nobody tells you about that pain. It's a crucible, a furnace that either destroys you completely or transmutes you into something harder, purer, more valuable than you were before. Lily Evans looked at me once with disgust, with fear, with revulsion, and I deserved it. I'd called her something unforgivable in a moment of wounded pride and juvenile stupidity. But that look, it shattered something in me that never quite reassembled the same way. I could have let that destroy me, could have let the bitterness ferment into hatred, could have decided that if I couldn't have her love, I'd settle for her suffering. Some part of me wanted to, the dark, wounded part that whispered seductive promises about revenge and vindication. But unrequited love has a strange property. When you truly love someone, not the possessive, ego-driven version, but the real thing. Their happiness matters more than your own satisfaction. Their safety matters more than your comfort. Their existence matters more than your recognition. So I made a choice, not once, but every single day for years. I chose to protect what she loved, even after she was gone. I chose to serve a cause she believed in, even though she'd never know my contribution. I chose to become the thing I hated, a spy, a liar, a man standing in moral ambiguity, because that's what keeping her legacy alive required. And there was no reward, no afterlife reunion where she'd thank me, no moment of recognition where anyone would understand the weight of what I carried. Just the daily grind of doing what needed to be done, invisible and unappreciated. But here's the alchemy. That unrewarded devotion refined me in ways comfort never could have. It stripped away every false layer, every pretension, every version of myself that was performing for approval. What remained was something elemental, pure purpose, uncontaminated by the need for validation. You see, when you love with the expectation of reward, you're constantly measuring, constantly adjusting, constantly performing to maintain that flow of reciprocation. But when you know, absolutely know, that no reward is coming, you're freed from that performance. You can love with a ferocity and purity that rewarded love can never achieve. It's like a potion brewed without concern for who will drink it. You're not cutting corners, not substituting inferior ingredients because it's good enough for the purpose. You are creating a masterpiece for its own sake, because the act of creation is the only reward that matters. This is what unrequited devotion teaches you. Love isn't about completion. It isn't about you complete me or we're two halves of a whole. That's codependency dressed in romantic language. Real love is about becoming complete within yourself through the act of loving, about discovering that your capacity to give, to sacrifice, to persist, that capacity is the treasure, not what you receive in return. Most people will never understand this. They'll pity you. They'll tell you to move on or find someone who appreciates you or stop wasting your time. They'll frame your devotion as pathology, your persistence as unhealthy attachment. And maybe they're right by conventional standards. But conventional standards have never transmuted lead into gold, have they? But let's not pretend this is some enlightened, painless transcendence. Let's not wrap this in spiritual bypassing and call it growth, because the truth is uglier, more visceral, more devastating than that. Loving without reward will hollow you out. It will take pieces of you that you didn't even know existed and burn them as fuel. It will demand sacrifices you never agreed to make. It will ask you to keep giving when you have nothing left, and then ask for more. There were nights, countless nights, when I questioned everything, when the loneliness felt like it would suffocate me, when I looked at the happy couples, the reciprocated loves, the people who got to experience being chosen, being wanted, being enough, and I felt a bitterness so intense it could have poisoned an army. Why them and not me? What cosmic joke decided that my love would be unreturned, my devotion unrecognized, my sacrifice invisible? What kind of universe architects that particular brand of cruelty? And the worst part, there's no one to rage against, no villain to fight, no curse to break, just the silent, indifferent machinery of fate grinding you into dust while you maintain your post. Keep your promises, honor your commitments to someone who isn't even alive to care. This is the price, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a fantasy. You'll watch others receive the love you never got. You'll see lesser devotions rewarded while yours goes unacknowledged. You'll endure people questioning your motives, misunderstanding your actions, attributing your purest intentions to your darkest impulses. You'll become the villain in stories where you were actually the savior, simply because the truth is too complex, too nuanced, too uncomfortable for tidy narratives. And you cannot defend yourself, cannot explain, cannot correct the record. Because the moment you do, you contaminate the purity of your devotion with the need for recognition. You prove that you weren't actually loving without reward. You were just waiting for a different kind of payment. So you endure the mischaracterization, the judgment, the suspicion. You let them believe whatever they need to believe, because their understanding isn't the point. Their approval was never part of the equation. I was hated by the very person I protected. Harry Potter looked at me with contempt for years. Every interaction was laced with hostility, every lesson tinged with mutual resentment, and I couldn't tell him, couldn't soften that hatred with truth, because keeping him alive required keeping him in the dark, and his opinion of me, however it wounded, was irrelevant compared to his survival. That's what loving without reward demands. The willingness to be misunderstood, to be vilified, to carry a truth that dies with you because sharing it would compromise the very thing you're protecting. Most people couldn't do it. Most people would crack under that pressure, would spill the truth just to ease their own suffering, would trade the mission for a moment of being seen correctly. And there's no shame in that. It's human. We're wired to need validation, to crave understanding, to want our stories told with us as the hero rather than the villain. But some missions require villains who are actually heroes in disguise. Some love stories need to remain untold. Some sacrifices are only sacrifices if they remain unrecognized. And if you choose that path, if you commit to loving without reward, without recognition, without the comfort of being understood, you need to make peace with something terrifying. You might carry this weight forever. You might die with your truth unspoken, your devotion unacknowledged, your love unreturned and unappreciated. And you have to be willing to pay that price, not because you're a martyr, not because you're self-destructive, but because something, someone, matters more than your own comfort. That's not noble. It's not heroic. It's just what love looks like when you strip away everything that isn't essential. And it will break you in ways you never recover from. But it will also make you into something unbreakable. Here's the paradox that will bend your understanding. The moment you accept that you'll never get what you want is the moment you become truly free. Stay with me on this. because it contradicts everything you've been taught about hope, about positive thinking, about manifesting your desires and believing in happy endings. But there's a peculiar liberation that comes when you stop hoping for reciprocation and simply commit to the love itself. When I finally accepted, truly, viscerally accepted, that Lily would never be mine, that she was gone, and even if she weren't, she'd still choose him, something shifted. The desperate grasping stopped. The fantasy died, and in the void left behind, I found a clarity I'd never possessed when I was still hoping. Because hope, for all its pretty packaging, is a chain. It keeps you tethered to outcomes you can't control. It makes you perform, adjust, strategize, always angling for that possibility, that slim chance, that maybe someday hope makes you a prisoner of the future, forever postponing your peace until circumstances align. But hopelessness, real, accepted, integrated hopelessness, that's freedom. When you know, not fear, not suspect, but know with absolute certainty that your love will never be returned, you stop performing. You stop trying to be the version of yourself that might finally be chosen. You stop editing your personality, your interests, your essence to increase your odds. You just become what you are, loving from that place without compromise. It's like casting a spell without expecting it to work. You're not cutting corners because of the futility. You're executing it with perfect precision, precisely because the outcome is no longer corrupting the process. The magic becomes pure because it's no longer contaminated by desperation. I stopped trying to make Harry like me, stopped trying to soften the blow of my teaching, stopped attempting to build rapport or connection. What was the point? He'd inherited his mother's eyes, but his father's judgment of me. The verdict was already in, so I simply did what needed to be done, taught him, protected him, prepared him, without the performance of trying to be appreciated for it. And in that surrender, I found a strange integrity. My actions became honest in a way they never could have been if I was still angling for approval. Every decision was made on its actual merits, not filtered through how will this make them see me differently. This is what the world doesn't understand about unrewarded love. They think it's tragic that it diminishes you, but it actually expands you, because you're no longer compressed into the shape of someone else's expectations. You're no longer performing love, you're embodying it, and there's a wholeness to that, a completion that reciprocated love, with all its negotiations and adjustments, can never quite achieve. Think about the people in your life you're trying to impress, the ones whose approval you're chasing, the ones you're performing for, editing yourself for, hoping will finally see you the way you want to be seen. Now imagine accepting that they never will, not because you're unworthy, but because that's just not the story you're in together. What would you do differently if you knew, absolutely knew, that your effort would never change their perception? Would you stop trying, or would you keep doing what feels true, but without the contamination of expectation? Most people stop. They withdraw. They protect themselves. They redirect their energy toward more promising targets. And that's rational. That's self-preservation. That's what you're supposed to do. But what if you didn't? What if you kept loving, kept giving, kept showing up, not out of some masochistic attachment or delusional hope, but because that's who you've decided to be, not for them, for you. That's the freedom hiding inside impossibility. The liberation of choosing your actions based on your values rather than their outcomes. Of loving because that's what you do, not because you expect it to get you somewhere. It's terrifying. It's lonely. It defies every survival instinct screaming at you to protect yourself, to cut your losses, to stop investing in bankrupt ventures. But it's also the only way to discover what you're actually made of when you strip away all the transactional noise. You want to know the cruelest joke of unrewarded love. You'll probably never see the impact of what you've given. You'll pour your entire being into something, someone, some cause, and you'll die before the harvest comes. I gave Harry Potter the final piece of the puzzle with my last breath. Literally, my memories, my truth, the explanation he'd spent years lacking. I handed it all over in my final moments. And I didn't get to see what he did with it. Didn't get to witness whether it mattered. Didn't receive confirmation that 17 years of sacrifice, deception, and unwavering devotion had actually accomplished anything. I had to die on faith, on the belief that the seeds I'd planted in darkness would somehow, somewhere, bloom into something that justified the cost. And that's what they don't prepare you for. This isn't a story where you get the satisfaction of seeing your efforts validated. You don't get the movie ending where everyone finally understands what you were doing, where they tearfully apologize for doubting you, where your name is cleared and your legacy celebrated. You just do the work, plant the seeds, water them with your blood if necessary, and then you disappear before the garden grows. Most people need to see the results of their labor, need to witness the impact, need confirmation that their suffering produced something beautiful. It's how we stay motivated, how we justify the sacrifices, how we convince ourselves that meaning exists in the chaos. But loving without reward means releasing that need entirely. It means accepting that your contribution might be one small, invisible link in a chain of causation so complex that nobody, not even you, will ever be able to trace which action led to which outcome. Maybe my protection of Harry mattered. Maybe it was decisive. Or maybe he would have survived anyway, and I was just a footnote, an auxiliary character in someone else's destiny. I'll never know. And that not knowing is part of the bargain. You're building cathedrals you'll never see completed. You're writing music you'll never hear performed. You're planting forests whose shade you'll never rest under. And you have to find peace with that, or the weight of your invisible contributions will crush you. Because here's the thing about legacy, the real kind, not the curated social media versions. It ripples outward in ways you cannot predict or control. That student you mentored might inspire someone decades from now. That sacrifice you made might enable something beautiful 3 generations down the line. That love you gave might teach someone else how to love purely, even though they never knew your name. Or it might amount to nothing, might dissolve into the void. might be forgotten completely, erased by time and circumstance, as if you never existed at all. And you have to be okay with both possibilities. I think about Lily's son sometimes. Wherever consciousness goes after death, if it goes anywhere at all, did he understand in the end? Did those memories I gave him recontextualize everything? Did he grasp the magnitude of what was given without expectation of return? Or did he just see a flawed, bitter man who happened to be useful despite his ugliness? I'll never know. And I had to make my peace with that uncertainty while staring into death's face. Had to decide that the love itself, the devotion, the sacrifice, the unwavering commitment was its own justification, regardless of whether anyone ever acknowledged it. That's the test. Not whether you can love when it's rewarded. Anyone can do that. But whether you can love when you'll never know if it mattered. When the story ends before you get your resolution. When you're asked to have faith in something you cannot verify. Trust in outcomes you won't survive to witness. Your modern world hates this. You want metrics, data, confirmation. You want to see the likes, count the followers, measure the engagement. You want proof that you're making a difference, because without that proof, how do you know you're not just screaming into the void? But that need for verification, it compromises the purity of the work. It turns your devotion into a transaction where you're constantly checking to see if it's worth continuing. And the moment you start keeping score like that, you've already lost what made the love valuable in the first place. So you have to let go, release the outcome, surrender the need to know. Give everything and trust, or don't trust, but give anyway. That somehow, somewhere, it matters. Even if you never get to see how. Especially if you never get to see how. So here we are, at the end of this meditation on futility and beauty, on suffering and transcendence, on the particular brand of madness that makes someone choose unrewarded devotion in a world built on transactions. And you're probably waiting for me to tell you it's worth it. That there's some grand revelation at the end, some cosmic payoff that makes all the pain make sense. Some assurance that if you love purely enough, selflessly enough, without expectation of return, the universe will somehow balance the scales. I can't give you that. I won't lie to you the way others have. The truth is messier, more uncertain, more uncomfortable than the neat narratives you've been fed. Loving without reward doesn't guarantee enlightenment. It doesn't promise transformation. It doesn't ensure that your sacrifice will be remembered or that your devotion will mean anything to anyone except you. It might destroy you. It might be the worst decision you ever make. It might leave you hollow and broken, wondering if you wasted your entire existence on something, someone who never deserved that level of commitment. Or it might be the only thing that makes you real, the only experience that strips away the performance and reveals what you actually are underneath all the social conditioning and self-protection. The only love that teaches you what you're capable of when you stop negotiating and start giving without calculation. I can't tell you which it will be, because it's different for everyone, and you won't know until you're standing where I stood, at the end of everything, looking back at the path you chose, unable to change it even if you wanted to. What I can tell you is this: you're going to have to make a choice. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're standing at that crossroads right now, knowing that loving this person, this cause, this calling will cost you everything and give you nothing in return. The safe choice is obvious. Protect yourself. Redirect your energy toward reciprocal relationships. Invest in people who invest in you. Keep your heart guarded until you find someone who treats it with the care you deserve. That's wisdom. That's self-preservation. That's what every reasonable voice will counsel you toward. But there's another choice, the unreasonable one, the choice that defies every survival instinct and economic principle, the choice to love anyway, to give anyway, to serve anyway, not because you're weak or desperate or delusional, but because something in you recognizes that this particular love, unreturned, unrewarded, unreasonable as it is yours to give. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the fact that you can love this purely, this completely, this foolishly, maybe that capacity itself is the treasure, regardless of what it purchases. I don't know if I'd make the same choices again. I've had years, or whatever exists beyond years, to contemplate that question. Would I still pledge myself to protecting Lily's son if I knew how it would end? Would I still endure the loneliness, the misunderstanding, the hatred, if I could see the full cost up front? Some days I think yes. Some days I think I was a fool who could have chosen differently, could have found some small measure of happiness if I'd just let go. But here's what I know for certain: that love, that unrewarded, unreciprocated, impossible love, made me into something I could never have become in comfort. It demanded a version of myself I didn't know existed. It carved away everything false until only something essential remained. Was it worth it? I honestly don't know. But it was mine, fully, completely, undeniably mine. Nobody else could have given it. Nobody else could have lived it. And in a world of borrowed experiences and performed emotions, there's something valuable about that authenticity, even when it destroys you. So I'll leave you with the only question that matters. What kind of love are you capable of? Not what kind you want to receive. Not what kind you've been taught to expect. But what kind can you give when there's nothing in it for you except the giving itself? Because until you answer that question, really answer it, with your choices and not just your words, you'll never know what you're actually made of. And maybe, just maybe, that knowledge is the only reward that ever really mattered. The rest is just noise. Beautiful, comforting, validating noise, but noise nonetheless. Now go. Decide what kind of fool you're willing to be, because the world has enough people playing it safe.